All right, welcome back to the Pro Football Hall of Fame here in Canton, Ohio, the most inspiring place on earth. My name is Jake Ray, and I'm the Youth and Education Manager, and we are happy to present another great Pro Football Hall of Fame Before the Snap series today, featuring our special guest, as you can see behind me, Mr. Craig Peters of the Minnesota Vikings. And we'll get to him here in a second. I know you guys want to hear from him. You don't want to hear me talk the entire time. But if this is the first time you've tuned in for this program, we first want to thank you. You're going to learn a lot about all the different careers in and around the NFL. Now, we know you can be a pro athlete. We know you can be a coach, and we know all those jobs you can have in sports. But we're here, our job, we want to showcase all the different unique careers in and around the NFL. Long story short, if you have a passion for something and you love sports, there's a very good chance you're going to be able to combine those and have a career in the sports industry. If you've tuned in with us before, again, thank you so much for tuning in. You guys are in store for another excellent program. A little bit about us here at the Pro Football Hall of Fame. It's our mission to honor the heroes of the game, to preserve its history, to promote its values, and to celebrate excellence everywhere. And those values we promote are those of commitment, integrity, courage, respect, and excellence, all of which not only make our Hall of Famers great football players, but they make our Hall of Famers great dads, sons, brothers, members of their community, and truly can make an employee great in their organization. So I'm excited to hear how those values have not only impacted the way Mr. Peters works on a day-to-day basis with his job, but truly how he thinks the game of football can impact those who play it, coach it, watch it on TV, are fans of it, because those values are ever present in the game and your life as well. Before we do get started today and we introduce our special guest, got to send out a few thank yous. So first of all, Craig, thank you so much for giving time out of your busy schedule to talk and to speak with us today. We know the NFL isn't just a fall job. It's a year-round job every day. You got to be doing something. So we appreciate you giving a little bit of your time for us today and truly everything you do for the game of football and indirectly for us here at the Pro Football Hall of Fame. Secondly, I'd like to thank our teachers, administrators, educators, professors, anybody that allowed us into their classroom with our Before the Snap program this year. We know this school year has been crazy. We're just starting to get back to what we see as normal. So we appreciate just being a small part of your learning experience this year. And lastly, as always, got to thank our students. Without you guys, this program doesn't take place. We want to hear your questions. We can't ask your questions unless you put them in the comment section. So like we always do, let us know where you're watching from, what school we got represented. We want to reach the entire country today. We've done pretty good so far this year. So let's do it again, see how far across the country we can get. So let us know where you're watching from, even if you're not a student. Let us know what city you're tuned in from, what school you're at, and we'll do our best to give you a shout out there. And if you have a question, throw that in the comment section. Nathan is back with us this week. He's in our Gold Jacket Lounge waiting for all those questions to come in. So let us know if you have a question. Let us know your name, the school you go to, and your question. And like we do every week, we'll try and make that a part of the program today. So without further ado, we are lucky and grateful to be joined by our special guest today, Mr. Craig Peters, who is the senior editor of Vikings.com and the team's official publications, including the Playbook and game programs, the team's yearbook, and quarterly Legends newsletters. He's been in this role since the summer of 2018 and works with two other members of the editorial team within the Vikings Entertainment Network. Unique projects he has helped with include the research and writing of the Minnesota Vikings Museum and writing and editing text that is displayed inside U.S. Bank Stadium and Twin Cities Orthopedics Performance Center. It's a mouthful there. Peters had worked Super Bowl 46, 47, 48 as a public relations volunteer. He has worked the past 4 as a research protocol assistant for Van Wagner Sports and Entertainment Productions, fact-checking and proofing graphics displayed on in-venue video boards. Additionally, and probably most importantly, lucky to be married to a wonderful wife and teacher and a father of one daughter who is 2, who enjoy hiking and cooking together. So without further ado, everybody, please welcome our special guest today, Mr. Craig Peters. Craig, welcome to Before the Snap.
Well, thanks so much for having me, Jake. It's such an honor to be joining you. Welcome to all the students and the teachers coming in. And just real quick, like you never know the impact that you make as a teacher, but believe me, there are still conversations I have with teachers and inspirations that I call on from multiple levels. So thanks everyone.
Teachers and coaches, right? No matter how old you are, you always have that special bond with those teachers and those coaches. Craig, every program we like to kind of just give a basis of what your job consists of. So
Sure.
day-to-day basis, what does the senior editor of written content for the Vikings do, within your role?
Yeah, and so I mean, you hit on it a little bit, but the season schedule is a thing of its own, and then in the off season we work on some longer term projects and some look ahead. So I mean, the regularity of an NFL season is quite welcome. You pretty much can set your calendar and produce content, usually about 6 or 7 items a day, 6 days a week on Vikings.com during the season, and then we have some longer term projects and look aheads right now. We're coming off the draft and scheduled release. That's always one of my favorite times of year, is you finally get to see the win. You know who, you've known who for all this time, but you finally get to see win. And for some reason, it just becomes more palpable that football is coming back, and especially this year after such a long year and the absence of fans in most venues. We definitely miss seeing the Vikings fans at our home games this year. It's a pretty special environment, so that is exciting. We're working on some publication plans. We're doing some projects there, and just getting ready to hopefully welcome the full return of football this fall and make it very special.
We are looking forward to that as well. Hopefully, being that first event here for the annual Hall of Fame game during Enshrinement Week powered by Johnson Controls to help kick that season off. Just being kind of the kid who really doesn't know a lot about what you do. So when I see written content, I think, all right, what this guy's all he does is write stories. So I know that's probably the stereotypical thing when you deal with your career. But what all else do you work on besides, obviously that's a huge part of what you do, but what else, does your job consist of outside of just, writing and editing stories that are featured in different places?
Yeah, sure. So that's the primary work, but in recent years, I've been able to help out with our in-stadium productions with video boards, and the Vikings Entertainment Network is going more and more into live programming, and just really trying to harness the emerging media that are becoming more available to us in different ways to continue to tell stories. My boss Brian Harper always puts a focus on storytelling, and that aligns with Eric and Lindsay that I work with on the editorial team. We all really take pride in telling stories, and whether that canvas is a desktop long form, if it's something on your phone that you're scrolling through, with a few more bells and whistles and newer looks, it can be as simple as like getting the cut lines right. After wins, Coach Zimmer likes to put up victory boards in the facility. So Monday mornings after wins, we're working on that with the photographers, and we're getting the recaps of the game up. And there's always a quick turnaround to get those up because Coach wants them up, So understandably, so there's that canvas that's fun to work on too. And then you mentioned some of the projects that have been, I would consider almost once in a career, was helping research and write for the Vikings Museum. So we continue to work on that and look for new ways, as you well know, to in new exhibits and topics to cover in special spaces.
Yes, I definitely know a lot about that here at the Pro Football Hall of Fame for sure. And you mentioned a lot of those things, and written content. You're thinking magazines, newspapers, stories online. How much has the digital age affected what you do? It's 10, 15, 20 years ago, everybody got the newspaper in the morning. They're in there reading what happened the day before. So we're at a phone to where I could pick up my phone here and I can read stories from 10 minutes ago, 10 years ago. How has that digital age impacted your career specifically?
It's quite amazing how much information is readily available, and you talk to people that are even older than me, and how they used to have to wait so long, and they couldn't see even the games every week, like, so their hope, like if they lived out of market, their experience with the Vikings was maybe a 30-second highlight on a Sunday highlight show from the so it's just kind of incredible the way that has brought things to the forefront. It's added an incredible amount of competition. It's and you're always competing for attention too. We have so many outlets for our attention, so it really puts a focus on trying identify engaging content, informative content, entertaining content, blend it all together. And it's kind of amazing. Like, when I started, even there wasn't Twitter, there wasn't, I was several years into my career before Twitter became a thing. So that was widely used, and it's kind of incredible to me. It would have been quite helpful in my pre-NFL life when I was a crime and courts reporter for a newspaper in South Carolina for 2 years, and it was just starting to really come to the forefront, but not really harnessed yet. So I think that those things are interesting, and the way that people consume content with regard to whether they like to lean back or they look down, or that's kind of terminology that I'm borrowing from another one of my bosses, Scott Kegley, who's like super gifted. He came to us from the 49ers and is just right at the cutting edge of most of the emerging media and technology. So it's been awesome to learn from him.
I like that. I've never heard that before. If you're a person who takes in content, leaning back with your feet up in a recliner, or you've got your head buried in
Yeah.
your phone or a tablet, I think that's pretty cool. Now you mentioned, I got into a little bit what you did there previously, and it sounds like this career field, writing, editing, that form is something that you've had interested in a long time. Was that always the goal, or was there another path that you kind of saw yourself going and ended up changing to going down the path you are now?
Well, I'm so glad you asked, because yeah, the winding path is quite the way to describe it. Because I originally thought I was going to be an architecture professional, and enrolled at Mississippi State, made it into architecture school, lasted a year and a half. Wasn't something I was ever going to achieve anywhere near what I was hoping to achieve. So I really had to look myself in the mirror, give an honest assessment, and pivot and say, what should I do now? And to be honest, I did not like reading or writing very much at all early in my education, probably until sophomore year of high school, when I started taking Latin. That actually opened things up for me with regard to English, and enjoying writing and reading so much more. And my mom, who was an elementary librarian, probably breathed a sigh of relief when I finally started liking that. So it was my second semester in architecture school. On Friday nights, I would kind of stay behind in the studio, try to finish up some projects or whatever. But then I'd always allow myself to get flip through the Sports Illustrated. Came that day, I think, in my campus mailbox. So I was flipping through, and it was the Friday after Super Bowl 34, Rams Titans. Had this amazing like photo depiction montage of the drive that Steve McNair almost led, and so being from Clarksville, Tennessee, the Titans had just recently come to the area, and it was such an exciting time. And just flipping through that, I was like, man, I wonder what it would be like, or I think it would be so amazing to work in sports. And so I kept that in the back of the head. And when architecture ultimately didn't work out, I needed to regroup and plan and kind of chart my path. I wound up shifting to interdisciplinary studies at Mississippi State, which allowed me to load up on teaching, coaching, and sports communication classes, and just kind of make up some hours. And it was about the quickest path to complete all degree requirements, because a year and a half of architecture doesn't
Not a lot of
transfer
crossover,
to,
is
yeah,
there?
not a lot of crossover. So the pivot was great. The campus newspaper provided me a great opportunity. I mean, I think my very first story was about the soccer team, and then I got shifted to volleyball and became the volleyball beat writer, and then men's basketball eventually, and then sports editor, and just kind of kept growing and growing and trying to keep going. And then I had one job offer out of college, and I took it. It was in Georgia, north of Atlanta. And it was also a great opportunity too. I mean, when it's your only opportunity, it's a great opportunity, and learned a lot there, and just tried to continue to learn every step of the way. A few months later, an opportunity to be hired in Athens, Georgia, became available. So I worked for the paper there, and that staff was just so incredibly gifted that our sports editor had really been involved when CNNSI launched, and then the assistant sports editor was super gifted visually. So like his layouts were amazing. He went on to become sports editor at Houston Chronicle. The prep writer was a legend, probably still is in those parts. And so it was just a unique blend of folks to continue learning from. And that's another thing to emphasize is I never feel the learning is done.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think it's cool you walk through your journey there, because it's a cool thing about sports. Sometimes you know exactly what you want to do, and you set out on that path. And sometimes you kind of gotta, kind of weave your way through to find that, go through that adversity, and take some courage. That one of our values we talked about there, to truly find what you want to do. And it's funny, you tell that story about, kind of Super Bowl 34 being that key moment that kind of pivoted you down that sports career path. And I'm glad you brought up the Super Bowl, because as we mentioned before, I've got Kara Kwasinski, who's live in our museum right now, actually in front of something that goes along very, very well with the Super Bowl. So I'm going to throw it out to Kara and let her take it away.
Yes, hello everybody. Welcome to the Lamar Hunt Super Bowl Gallery. It is right here in this gallery. It's one of my favorite galleries at the museum, where we have artifacts from the biggest game, from the NFL schedule each year. As Jake said, my name is Kara. I'm the senior video producer and audio engineer here at the hall. And today, obviously, you can see I'm standing right next to the Vince Lombardi Trophy, which is the end goal for every single team in the NFL. We know you're not a player. Our team has done a little bit of research, and as you touched on a couple times, we've worked a handful of Super Bowls as a public relations volunteer. What have those experiences been like? And can you touch on working the Super Bowl?
I'm sure. Yeah, it's been amazing. First of all, the display is beautiful. The elusive Lombardi. So it was kind of a leap of faith, but thankfully I had just completed my first graduate internship with the Titans in 2010, and it brought to my attention that there was this opportunity to volunteer on the PR staff, and so I drove to Indianapolis. I stayed with family members of a friend. Their grace, they had never met me, had no clue. They were just like, come on in. I mean, that's, you gotta love Indiana, right? So it was incredible just to see that big of an event come together and all the inner workings, and learn from people who have been working in the NFL for 20 plus years. It wound up being a tremendous networking opportunity, because two of the people that have worked so many Super Bowls are on the Vikings PR staff. So fast forward a few years, and when I'm applying for the Minnesota Vikings job in 2014, both Bob Hagan and Tom West had remembered my work from the previous three Super Bowls, or I think maybe there was a gap year too, but so they had remembered me, and I had maintained contact with them. So the networking opportunities, in addition to the in venue learning experiences, were just incredible. So I think the Indianapolis one, I was like in the Ox Media area, sitting next to Robert Klimko, and we were just talking about the game and everything. And then later role, the one in New Orleans, I was actually assigned to, and actually the one in New York, New Jersey, I was assigned to help with the radio crew to make sure they didn't get wiped out by the television cart. So yeah, you don't want them getting a blindside hit. So so those opportunities were fantastic. And then fast forward a couple more years, and Minnesota's hosting, and after previously volunteering for those, I kind of got volunteered to the position because Van Wagner needed a little bit of help, and it went so well that they decided that position could be added going forward. And I've received such grace that they've brought me back to the past three, and so hopefully to keep going, because it's such an incredible time. Continued learning again, and just like I'm just always in wow of watching those folks work, because they're some of the best in the entire world at what they do, and you just feel like you're the one bringing the whole team down, and you never want to do that. So, but the values that the Hall of Fame focuses on, you can see so often in people that have excelled in sports. And I'm not talking about myself, I'm talking about the people I've been fortunate enough to work with.
Definitely. Now, I've only been to one Super Bowl, and I joke and say it's my favorite one since I've only been to one. What one really stands out in your head? Do you have a favorite one? Is there any moment that stands out that really is like, this was my Super Bowl moment?
I think you always remember your first more than anything. And so after the game in Indianapolis, my assignment was to assist with Patriots quotes. And that game came down to the wire. You're on the field in, like, it's funny seeing the people that you worked with all week in the background of the NFL film shots, the slow-mo of like the ball coming down and almost being caught. And I'm like, oh yeah. And I mean, even 10 years later, I'm still like, oh yeah, so that moment, you're either going to have someone on top of the world or at the very bottom of it. And then your job is to try to get them to give you quotes or go do a media session after like they came that close. So it was an extensive effort to try to do that. But I was able to get my two players to the podium. And so you just always remember that one. The game was so good. And then a couple of the others, I mean, the New Orleans one stands out as well because of the blackout. And then I had a similar role after the game, but the team won, and I was assigned Terrell Suggs, and trying to communicate with someone that's that high in the world and doesn't know you. And you're trying to get them to do what you need. And he wasn't happy with me at all. But after he went to the podium, he looks at me and he says, you know what? I actually enjoyed that. Thank you.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Well, thank you for that insight and all of your experience and stuff. I'm going to throw it back to Jake now in the studio. So back to you, Jake.
All right. Thanks, Kara. Appreciate you coming live from our museum there, giving us an inside look there at the Vince Lombardi trophy we have on display. Now, I'm actually now going to take it and throw it to Nathan for the first time today, who's got a question about something you have already mentioned a little bit of today. So I'm going to throw it to Nathan now in our Gold Jacket Lounge. So, Nathan, the floor is yours.
Yeah, awesome, Jake. Thank you so much for sending it out here. And Craig, before I ask the question, I just got to encourage, if there are any students watching, go ahead, submit your question. Let us know where you're watching it from. We would much rather ask your questions as opposed to my question or Jake's questions. But I guess a personal question from me, Craig, is you mentioned graduate school, and you kind of talked about your undergrad experience where you switched majors and things like that. So you went back and got your master's after you had, quote unquote, started your career. Why was that important to you, and kind of how has that helped you? And then I guess the last part of that, how would you encourage students that are considering graduate school? Yes, no, maybe, where are you at with that?
I don't think there's a blanket answer. I think it's up to everyone. And as you mentioned, I had worked in newspapers. I had done sports writing. I had done part-time desk work. I had done a shift of 2 years on crime and courts, and that wasn't what I was hired to do, but they needed me to do it, so I did it. And it was a full-time opportunity. And after a couple of years on that beat, I was kind of ready to not write anything anymore, and looking to pivot from newspapers and maybe that career. So I wanted to go back to graduate school and assess opportunities that might come from that. The sport administration master's programs were emerging quite readily around the country, and it just seemed like a great way to transition. And I was 30 years old when I went back to grad school. So most of the people in my program at Belmont University in Nashville were going straight from undergrad to grad school. I was grateful personally that I had had a few years in between. So that might be the right model for some people. Others might prefer to just motor through and get it done. It depends on a lot of factors involved. I was personally grateful because I think that everything in between undergrad and grad school prepared me to do better in grad school. And when the opportunity to intern with the Titans came about, I was well seasoned, and I think positioned to try to make the most of it. The approach I took when I got there was try to treat every day like I was on the job interview. Keep getting my foot in the door, make sure I didn't do anything to shut it on my own foot. And then fortunately, they were able to bring me back as an intern in 2011. That was the first time they had ever brought an intern back in that role. And then in spring of 2012, they were able to create a part-time role for me, like a 30-hour a week type thing. And I was able to do that for 2 more years and really kind of keep growing and learning the industry and the in locker room experience and the coaching experience and trying to see the big picture of things too. Really readied me for that. But in grad school particularly, I tried to find as many opportunities as possible to assess the entire sports industry. So that means like volunteering for the OVC basketball tournament championships. Like I'm really sitting at a back curtain door for hours at some of like the NCAA events, but I'm seeing the whole working. So it was still great volunteer opportunities, and that was one of the reasons why I picked Belmont, is because the Nashville market offered professional and college high school sports to really kind of assess the landscape. I also was fortunate to intern at Vanderbilt in between the first 2 Titans semesters, and that provided a great amount of background info and like a real understanding of the college sports schedule and how many events that are involved with working in college athletics every year, as opposed to 16 regular season games, 17 now, and 3, so 20 games instead of, well, that's not even a full basketball season or almost a so that understanding also helped a lot.
Yeah, it sounds like during your graduate time, or your, I guess, period of time that you were in graduate school, that you really did a great job of networking, and volunteering, whether they were internships or just flat out volunteer experience. It sounds like that's something you really took advantage of, and it's something that we, as part of this program, we kind of want to open students' eyes to all the opportunities out there to volunteer, to network, to kind of get your name out there. And one simple way that we've done that is on the Facebook stream that you guys are watching, students. We've put Craig's LinkedIn page, a link to his page. Go ahead, connect with him, let him know that you saw him on Before the Snap. Include a little message, make it a little bit personal. Don't just blindly connect with him, because I'm sure he'd be willing to answer any questions you guys might have in that capacity. And I would encourage you guys, we got another 15-20 minutes, submit some questions. We want to hear from you. But for right now, I'm going to send it back over to Jake to continue with some more questions.
Thanks, Nathan. Yeah, Craig. And I, normally we ask, what are some advice and tips and tricks you have on networking? But I think your answer you just talked about right there pretty much sums that up very, very well, and talked about, your goal is to get out and volunteer and get involved in so many things. And everybody thinks it's very important to do that, to find what you want to do. But and I can ask this to you, maybe this is how it applied to you. But for me, when I was in the situation, I wanted to find what I didn't like and really kind of eliminate that area. So would you echo that? And did you use your experiences to truly find like, all right, the editorial and the written side of sports is what I want to do?
I'm so glad you brought that up, because I fundamentally agree with knowing what you don't want to do is just as important as thinking what you do want to do, or believing you do know what you want to do. So that was another thing that I tried to assess with all those volunteer opportunities, and really take a 360 view. Well, here are the pros, here are the cons. I like this about this, I like that about that. But yeah, so like the in-person, to me, there's nothing that can replace in-person connections. And I feel so bad for students that have endured the past 15 months with the whole volunteerism and in-person opportunities being just shortchanged so greatly. But I do think that a lot of the students now are so much better from a social media connectability standpoint that they're going to be equipped to understand certain things really well, and maybe even use those tools once the in-person comes back full throttle to reinforce what they've done in person or to set up in-person opportunities.
Yes, and I think that, you know, and we talk so much about in-person opportunities, especially right now doing, you know, this last year there weren't a lot, to be honest, and you know, you really had to get creative and find those ways to include yourself. And like Nathan said, you know, just reaching out on LinkedIn is a very easy way to start that networking, and kind of maybe sit down for 10 minutes and interview somebody like this and say, you know, what do you do? What are some of the things you enjoy? And then you can take that experience even and wrap that in and say, all right, this might be something I'm interested, or on the complete opposite side, well, thank you, but this is not what I want to do.
Sure.
So there are so many different ways to go about that. And with that being said, I got the Facebook feed pull up here. I know I saw a question pop up, so I think we're going to send it back out to Nathan. We'll throw it back out to the Gold Jacket Lounge, and he's got a question for you coming from one of our viewers.
Yeah, we do have a question coming from a student that attends Boston University, and we're curious, you know, you talk about volunteer opportunities. How would you, Craig, recommend students to volunteer during this time, as it seems like the country is kind of coming out of, I guess, the COVID-19? I know different areas, there's still some restrictions and things like that, but I guess if we're looking forward to next football season, we'll make it specific to you and the Vikings. What are maybe some opportunities that you guys have that you could see other franchises as well giving students as volunteer or part-time opportunities for them to kind of get their foot in the door and gain some experience?
Yeah, I don't want to overspeak for the rest of the industry or anything like that, but I feel like just reaching out, if there's a particular department that you want to connect with within an organization, or if it's college sports or pro sports or whatever, there's camps also that are going to be coming back. I'm sure some organizations have reduced staff, and they might be trying to figure out how they're going to fill gaps from people that unfortunately had to be let go. We were significantly fortunate with the Vikings that our ownership was committed to not reducing staff because of the pandemic, and we're super grateful for that. That's not been the case everywhere, and we feel bad for everyone that was affected. I just if there are one of the things about my grad program was they were well established, where they had the volunteer pipeline with so many different entities in the Nashville area. So like hopefully your colleges are kind of connected too. I mean, the Boston market's gigantic, and you know, it's so much bigger than Nashville even, and so many opportunities there, I would think. But make sure you let people know you're interested. Definitely try to take in everything that such an experience would offer, and then be honest with yourself. Like, do I like this? Do my strengths align with this type of thing?
Yeah, I think that's a real simple first step that you're kind of throwing out there, telling students to, one, figure out what department you might be interested in volunteering with or interning with, and then you got to reach out. You got to let them know that you're out there, that you want to volunteer. Sometimes just sending in I'll say a blind resume or application, it'll be harder to stand out. But if you can reach out to them personally, find their email, whatever it may be, through LinkedIn, that can kind of help you create not just that opportunity, but that relationship and that networking that we have kind of discussed already. So I think that's a real simple first step. So I appreciate you answering that question. We got another question here, and this is from a student that attends Manhattan College. His name is Josh. He said, what would you say was the biggest hurdle or challenge that you faced after graduating when it came to working in the sports industry?
Okay. 2014 was my toughest year, hands down. So I'm 33 years old at that point. My time with the Titans is winding down. After 2 years of non-full-time, it was time to try to pursue full-time opportunity. I knew I wanted to try to stay in the NFL. It was not going to be a position. Like, I found out that the position wasn't going to get created in the middle of free agency. Actually, the day we signed Michael Orr. So then I'm staying at the office until like 9:30 or whatever for the contract to come through. And hadn't like even called my wife to let her know or anything like that. So that started a really tough year. But it was also amazing timing because of the way that other teams were starting to expand their digital offerings. So I was able to interview with the Browns and was one of 5 finalists there. I interviewed with the Rams and was one of 2 finalists there. And then I interviewed with the Chiefs, and we actually paid for my wife to go to Kansas City, and she loved it and everything. And they brought me in for the in-person interview, long process and everything, great one. But ultimately they decided to go with the other candidate, which is understandable too. And so then I'm like, oh, what do I do? I'm starting to look at other industries, maybe stay in Nashville and do something else. And it just so happened that the Vikings had the opportunity, and that was a team that I had already had connections with. And like, you never know who's kind of watching your work. I think that that's important too in the sports industry. Is I would encourage everyone to treat every day like they're on a job interview. Because it just so happened that Jerry Gray, one of the great defensive backs, had been our defensive coordinator in Nashville. And then he came up and was coaching defensive backs with the Vikings. And the person that hired me even asked Coach Gray, like, well, what do you think about this guy? So the fact that, and then the fact that you're always being observed, like if you put your best foot forward every day, then when your opportunity comes, you're going to be ready to take that next step. I would say is the way that with a lot of luck and blessings is the way it's worked out for me so far. And I hope that that's the case for a lot of people.
Yeah. Wow. I took 2 amazing things from that. First, just like the perseverance to go through those job interviews and get so close, with the Browns, with the Rams, with the Chiefs, and then to still have the resiliency to continue to kind of keep pressing forward with kind of, in a lot of ways, your dream. And then what you said there about treating every day like you're on a job interview, not so that you walk like on eggshells, but just, you want to put your best, like you said, your best foot forward. I mean, I never would have guessed that they're going to ask a coach, hey, what do you think about this writer? It just seems like they're not related at all, but he at least could speak to, hey, he always showed up on time. He worked hard. I heard other people say good things. So I think that's great advice for our students. Awesome
And
stuff.
leaving that Vikings job interview, I was driven to the airport by a person that was an intern at the time, and the person that hired me also asked the intern, "Hey, what do you think about this guy?" Like, and we'd had an awesome conversation between the facility and the airport, and now he's a ascending member of our personnel department, and so you're like I said, yeah. I don't think I love what you said about not walking on eggshells, but yeah, just trying to make sure that you're trying to show what you can do.
Yeah, no, that's awesome stuff. So great question there from our students. I'm gonna send it back to Jake for a couple more that we've got as we get close to wrapping things up here.
Yep, appreciate it. Yes, I want to echo that. I think that's great because especially in the sports industry, we touched on networking as a student, but even as a professional, that doesn't stop. Craig, we'll be honest, this is the first time I've ever seen your face, spoken to you. We've sent some emails back and forth, but this is, you can consider this networking. So, down the road when we get another Viking enshrined, you might make the trip to Canton, Ohio. We might meet in person. So that networking never stops, and you don't know who you're ever going to come in contact with. And in the sports industry, especially in the NFL, I think that is very, very important. And, we talk about, the game of football. We mentioned at the beginning those 5 values. You've been immersed in the game so long now. and you've seen so many different players, so many different coaches and everything go through the teams you've worked with, and you've seen how the game of football can impact somebody's life. So for you specifically, when you step back and look at your job and look at the game of football, how do you feel the game of football impacts those fans who watch it, those who play it, coach it? What are those life lessons the game of football can teach?
I think that one of the most important recurring themes of football is the importance of teamwork. And especially at a time when we seem to be becoming more and more divided, we're essentially all in this thing together. And I don't know that we're any more divided, but maybe we're more alert to our divisions that have been put in front of our faces on our phones and everything. So the teamwork component, it was frequently mentioned in my annual performance review that the teamwork aspect was something that peers anonymously cited about what they liked. And so I'm really proud of that. I feel like football illustrates that because you can have one person not do his or her job on a play, and that undercuts 10 other people doing the right thing. And if you have 10 but you don't have 11, you might not make it happen. So I feel like being a teammate and the commitment, I mean, it becomes quite apparent the level of talent that gets people to the NFL. I've been fortunate enough to see the level of commitment that takes people from the NFL to the Hall of Fame. And like, I just feel like while not everyone will be enshrined as a professional football player, you can put forth commitment and integrity and know that you love what you do and you have a passion for it and you want to help others find their passion and reach their passion too. So I just love the teamwork of football.
I think that's great. You know, not everybody is going to have a bronze bust here in Canton, Ohio, but that doesn't mean you can live. We like to call it the Hall of Fame life. You can't apply those same values to your life to become a Hall of Fame son or daughter or brother, member of your community, whatever it is. You can still put those values, first, in your life and help, everybody else around you live that Hall of Fame life, and which we think is super important. Not only to what we do here at the Hall of Fame, but truly the game in all aspects, from Pee Wee all the way up to that Hall of Fame level. Those values are very, very important, and truly, it makes a good employee as well. You mentioned teamwork, you've mentioned employees, numerous employees you've worked with, and it sounds like the Vikings organization is considered, a team as well. So that's kind of a cool question we like to ask, is because, there's obviously within a football organization, there's the football side and then there's the business side. And, they do work in some aspects together, but in a lot of them, they're kind of separated and they do their own thing. But for you, you're kind of sandwiched like right in the middle of all of that, getting to work with both sides. So when the football side succeeds, so when there's wins, when there's big plays, big moments, how does that impact your job and the entire organization as a whole?
Yeah, I think that one of the best illustrations of that is like in seasons where you make the playoffs. First of all, everyone's in a better mood. More people are talking and doing media, and like the interviews are better and more vivid, and it just like there's just nothing like covering a winning team. And I think even people in the traditional media will say that and admit that too. That while they may not like be biased per se, they do want to cover winners, so it just makes such a difference. And then like in the playoff years that we have had here, which has been every other, there's just been a considerable ramping up of like business side and fan engagement initiatives to go along with football success. You don't want to miss your moment. And that's another thing that Scott Kegley has been really good for our organization at taking those big moments to another level. And then like Coach Zimmer really understands the importance of getting the fans riled up, and so he's super helpful in terms of game presentation and wanting to get that atmosphere going and make it as tough for opponents to come in and play at US Bank Stadium as possible. So there's that too. And our general manager, Rick Spielman, an Ohio native, just around the corner, yeah, from the Hall of Fame, actually. He's super great about understanding that and getting that too. And the access that we've enjoyed over the years is good. Other teams are starting to catch up to that access. And so now we're looking for ways to continue to find more access or more, make it more intense, I guess, if you will. So that's kind of one of those things.
I know there's been a few big moments here in the past couple of years. You mentioned the Minneapolis Miracle. I'm sure that was not a very difficult task to write about, after the game was over. I personally know some Saints fans, so I apologize to all of them because that's, I know, is still a sore subject for them. But it's moments like that where everybody, you literally go from 0 to 100. I mean, in the blink of an eye. And it's cool to see how the entire organization is affected. And it's not just the football team. It's not just the coaching staff. It's truly from, writers to marketers to the janitors who are in there after the staff is gone. It truly affects everybody within the entire building. Got time for a few more questions here before we wrap up. And I just got a message from Nathan here that says we have one last Facebook question that we're going to ask. So I'm going to throw it out to him. He'll ask this last question, and then we'll wrap it up with one last question before we're finished. So Nathan, it's all yours.
Yeah, Jake, thanks so much. And we got a question from Daniel, a student at the University of Delaware. And he said, what's the biggest difference between writing for PR for the organization versus writing for a newspaper?
Sure.
So kind of writing from the team perspective versus writing for a newspaper. What's the biggest difference in your opinion?
Yeah, that's a great question. And the answer, I think, is going to be, it depends on the team that you work for. There are some teams that are super aggressive in terms of their criticism of the on-field stuff. And I think it also depends on the market that you're in as well. So it's the team and the market that make the biggest differences of that. The Titans were pretty laid back in terms of don't criticize, so then after it's the market and the organization, then it's the head coach. Coach Zimmer doesn't mince words usually, so that makes it easier on us. Rick Spielman in the same way. They understand that we kind of have to say what happened, but you don't really bemoan on it, you don't. That's never really been my type of style anyway, to be super critical. And I think that stems from covering high schools back in my, why make a high schooler look terrible in a newspaper, now it's a big difference when people are making millions and millions and millions, and there's so much riding on some of these games. But at the same time, I'm grateful that the Vikings were an opportunity, because I think my voice that I had kind of developed over the years didn't need much alteration to fit within how they wanted me to approach covering the team. And if you're a newspaper, you're obviously covering everything from a few off the field incidents that inevitably happen. You're being more critical of, say, play calling, mistakes by players. It's kind of a job to do, it's a different approach. And then also you're kind of getting a lot of information before we're able to publicize it too. So every year when free agency starts, we're like, all right, yeah, let's get everything right, lined up in a row, and stories inevitably break. And then sometimes it's a couple days before we're allowed to officially comment on things, just because of some of the things. So if you're okay with understanding that that's just not your primary function and role and capability, then writing for a team might be more of what you're looking for. But if you're looking to go out and break news and kind of try to be the first to deliver something, then I would say news outlets are more in line of. So it's kind of like a style and how much you want to direct your energy toward breaking news versus delivering lifestyle type content.
Yeah, I think you did a good job explaining the two different worlds and you've got experience in both, so you can definitely speak to that for sure. But I wanted to just thank you myself for joining us today for the Before the Snap program. I know that Jake's got one more question for you, but we had some great questions from our students, and I really appreciate your time today, Craig.
Thanks so much for having me.
Yep. Jake, back to you.
All right. Thanks, Nathan. Yes. And we're going to wrap up. And normally we ask, what is one piece of advice you want everybody to take away? But I think there was so much great advice in there. Don't want you to just have to repeat yourself again. So I'm going to kind of pivot in another direction and do a little bit of more personal question. Might be the hardest question you get from us today. But, there's an old cliche out there that says, you never work a day in your life if you truly love what you do. So our last question today is, why does Craig Peters love being the senior editor of written content for the Minnesota Vikings?
I think the opportunities to relay stories, the organizational commitment to trying to deliver the best presentation possible. We're super fortunate to have a great design team that we work with in-house. So that's super helpful for our publications. I always go back to that moment of flipping through the Sports Illustrated and seeing that layout. And I think that there could be opportunities to further connect with fans by the presentations that we're able to work with them and team with them on and bring it home. And then just the history that is with the Vikings franchise is super awesome. The fact that the team went to 4 Super Bowls but didn't win any. I know that's one of the knocks or one of the things that everyone thinks when they think of Vikings, but we were chatting before this started just about some of the legends that have stayed in the Minneapolis community, and they continue to enrich it. Alan Page is singular. Carl Eller, it's Jim Marshall, who I hope joins them in the Hall of Fame one day. I'll shamelessly plug Jim Marshall and his 277 consecutive starts as a defensive end, but just the class that they've extended, the grace that they've extended, and consider us as fellow Vikings. It's really kind of incredible. I don't want to overuse the family terminology type thing, but this has been an incredible place to be for my family, and I'm just continuously grateful every day that a dream aligned with an opportunity, and it's been realized, and it continues to get that much better every day.
Awesome. What a great way to wrap up this series, or this installment of the Pro Football Hall of Fame's Before the Snap series. And again, Craig, for myself, everybody here, thank you so much for giving some of your time and speaking about your journey, because everybody's is different. And we appreciate you giving your time and speaking to all of our viewers and even us. I'm sure there's stuff, Nathan and I take away every week. We get to talk to somebody new. So truly, from the bottom of our hearts, thank you so much for being a part of the program today.
It was such an honor to join you, and please do reach out. Let me know if I can ever help. I think you'll always find that the sports industry is full of people who benefited from help and are looking to pay it forward.
All right. Now, before everybody goes, just a couple quick reminders. Again, follow all of our great content we have here on the Pro Football Hall of Fame social media channels. And I'll plug the Minnesota Vikings as well, because you're probably going to get to see some articles from Mr. Peters on there. So Twitter, whatever it is, follow, subscribe to all those different channels to stay up to date with all the great content. Just got to see all the awesome schedule release videos that were put out. All of the great OTA stuff is coming out. Football is starting to come back. So make sure you're tuning in to all of those things. Here at the Hall of Fame, got a great podcast called The Mission, hosted by our great coworker and friend here in Canton, Jameer Howerton. Make sure you subscribe, give that a listen. A lot of cool stuff is being talked about on there. So stay tuned to all of that great stuff. Craig, Nathan sent me a message. I guess you're going to be here in August. I should have even thought about. We've got Steve Hutchison going in, so we are looking forward to having you as our guest here during Enshrinement Week, powered by Johnson Controls here in Canton, Ohio, to help kick off the 2021 NFL season. As far as Before the Snap, we got one Before the Snap program left this school year, the end of our first year. So we're super grateful for everybody who's tuned in and watched. We've got one great program left next week with Jordan Johnson, who works in events and marketing with the Baltimore Ravens. We're going to wrap up the series this year with her. So for myself, Nathan Martin, our director, Jerry Shockey, Kara Kozinski, who you heard from, all the way up to our president and CEO, Mr. David Baker. First off, Craig, thank you for everything you've done for the game of football and indirectly done for us here at the Hall of Fame. You don't know the impact that you have, and we truly see that here in Canton. And we're going to get to see it in person here in about 70 or so days. So we're looking forward to that. To all of our viewers, thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll see you right here next week on the Pro Football Hall of Fame's Facebook page for our Before the Snap program. Thank you, everybody.